Hey there, my name is Prakash. I'm the head of product of Xano. Today we're going to be talking about webhooks, what they are, and how you can connect them to a third-party service. Today we'll be talking or using the example of Webflow. So first of all, what is a webhook? So when we think about a webhook, it's really an action or a piece of code that is run after something else happens. So if that sounds confusing, let me try to explain it to you. Here I'm looking at a Webflow example site that I've put together, and I'll actually go ahead and launch it, or the Webflow version of it, in my browser. So when I go to the contact form here and I fill out this contact form, if you've ever used Webflow before and you click submit, it goes to their own CMS and you manage all of the submissions in their little spreadsheet viewer. However, if you also wanted this to send to another service, let's say like your Xano database, you would use a webhook to do that. So the first thing to ask is, okay, well, where does Webflow actually enable webhooks? A lot of services have a section for them. So if I go, for example, to my Webflow sites, I can see that this is the project. And so I click on the three dots and I click on settings. Now that I'm in settings, I can go to the integration section and I can scroll down to the bottom and I can see webhooks, right? I already have one defined, but I'm going to actually delete this and start from scratch so you can see what I did. So when I click Add Webhook, it says, number one, select the trigger. So Webflow supports a couple different webhooks, but the one that we want for this example is form submission. That means that when a form is submitted, it's going to call an external service that you define, and we're going to do Xano, and then it's going to send the data of that form response to that third-party service. So for this webhook URL, we're going to want to put it within Xano, and I've created a new workspace for it. But the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to look at the type of data or the structure of the data that Webflow sends to us so we can shape it properly and put it in Xano. Don't worry, I'm going to walk through what that means step by step. So I love this site. It's called webhook.site, and what this does is it provides you a unique URL that you can use to read out what the data looks like. We have it on our roadmap to put this type of feature within Xano, but for now, webhook.site is a great resource to use. So I'm going to click Copy to Clipboard here, and then here, back in my webhook section, I'm going to say when the form is submitted, go ahead and hit this webhook.site and show me what the response looks like. So I'm going to click on Add Webhook here. And so now that it's added, I can just go back to my contact form, and I'm going to fill out some information. So I'm going to put my name, Prakash. I'm going to go prakash.email.com, and I'm going to say this is a message. Okay? So when I click submit here, oh, I didn't put the at. There we go, prakash@email.com, and I'm going to click submit. All right, so it's been submitted. Now when I go to the webhook site, you can see it's been listening and it already gets that payload, right? So this is exactly the type of data that I'm going to be getting back from Webflow, which is awesome. So now that I know the shape of what this looks like, I'm going to go back to Xano, and I'm going to go ahead and start setting this up to receive the data from the webhook. So the first thing that we want to do is specify where we want the form submissions to live, which database table. So if I go to the database right here, I could put it in my user table, but typically I like to put data from other services in a brand new table. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Table here, and I'm just going to call this Webflow form submissions. Okay. Now I'm going to click Add Table. So here, I now need to add some fields. And so this is an important step here. I have to make sure that the fields that I add actually match what is being done in the website. So here, let me go to my contact form. So let me go to my pages here, and let me go to contact. And then here, if I select the input field, I can see, if I go to my settings, that this field is called name with a capital N, and it's a text field, okay? So if I go back to Xano, I'm going to do name with a capital N. I selected text. Okay, there we have name. Let's go to the next two sections. So we have email, that's a capital E, and that's type email. Let's go back to Xano. This time I'll do email, and I will go email. All right, we're almost done. Now we have the message, and the message is message with a capital M, and that's also text. So I'm going to do text, message. All right, So now I have everything that I need to add data into this database table. So now, instead of using Webhook, I want to use a Xano API endpoint to add it. And so when I go to my API and I go to the public group that Xano automatically generates for me, you can see that when I added the table, it automatically generated all of the CRUD, the create, read, update, delete operations for that table. So with a webhook, when you're sending data into Xano, you want to use the post because you're posting data into Xano. So we're going to use this endpoint called Webflow form submissions posts. I'm going to click here to edit it. And you can see that there are 3 sections to this. It takes an input. It does one function, which is it goes to the Webflow form submission database table, and it adds what you get from the input, and then it returns what the request is, okay? So in Xano, there's actually one thing that we need to do before we hook up this endpoint to Webflow, and that is we need to change how this is being inputted. So right now, it thinks that Webflow is going to send a separate name and a separate email and a separate message, but we know from webhook.site that it actually sends a JSON payload that looks like this. So we have to basically specify to Xano, hey, Webflow is going to send it to us in this JSON format. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to click on just any one of these, and I want to click Remove Database Link. What that does is that removes the input fields, the automatic management of the input fields from the database to the input. Now I want to specify the new type that Webflow is going to send me. So I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to say that it is a JSON object, okay? And so I'm going to, what I'm going to name this actually is called data. Why am I going to call it data? Well, in this webhook output that we're getting from Webflow, you can see that there's an object called data here, which has what I care about most: the name, the email, and the message. So when Xano will automatically pick up whatever object you choose in the response. So I'm going to call it data, and it's going to automatically map to right here. So here in Xano, I called it data. I'm going to click save. Now it says, okay, it's getting an input called JSON data, and then it's going to add a record in Webflow. Now notice there's no name, email, and message linked up yet. Well, what I want to do is I want to click this little drop down, and it's going to take the input from Webflow, which is data. This is this right over here. I want to select this. So I'm going to say data dot name. So I'm going to do data dot name. Okay, that's what I want there. Here, data dot email. So I'll go data dot email, and then finally for the text, I want to do data dot message. So data dot message. So we're basically saying take this input of data, which is what we're seeing here, and then pick out the name, email, and message, and then map it to these fields in the database table. So when this is called, it's going to add it to my database table. So I'm going to save this, and this is ready to go. I'm also going to click this to copy the endpoint URL. And when I go to the database and I go to this Webflow, you can see there's no records in here right now. So we're going to obviously change that. Now we're going to go back here, and we're going to remove this form submission webhook with webhook.site. So I'm going to delete to confirm. There we go. And I'm going to add one. And this time I'm going to do the form submission, but instead I'm going to use the Xano endpoint. So I just pasted in. Remember, I got that from right, if I go to my API here, I'll just show you just to make sure you understand. I copied this endpoint URL just by clicking here, and then I pasted it in here, okay? So I'm going to click Add Webhook. So now we're all ready to go. Now, when I go back to my contact form, let me refresh this page here. I'm just going to say Prakash2 at email.com, and I'm going to say this is working. So I'm going to click Submit. Webflow then submits the form to Webflow, but then that webhook sends it over to Xano. And when I go to Xano and I click Database and I go into here, I can see the Prakash2, my email, and my message is working. So this is a very simple example of how to post from a webhook from another service. I'll show you how to use the webhooks from within Xano in the next video, but I hope this was helpful. Happy building.